Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Bar. I'm your host, Danny Johnson. We're interviewing your favorite dry bar comedians. Joining me today, as you can see from the famous blue wall in his house, Costaki Economopoulos, biggest name in comedy. Welcome back.
Hey man, good to see you.
You're good to see you too. Your special football family and comedy, oh my.
Yeah.
And your first one, I looked back at our episodes. You were on this podcast for October 2022
Is that
was when
right?
when you were on.
Oh wow. That's
Yeah.
somewhat recently. That's more recently than I would have guessed.
Oh, okay.
I'm going the other way.
That memorable, huh? Um, yeah. So how did you when I looked at I did notice because the audience doesn't know I've worked with you quite a bit, especially early on in my career. Um, I can't remember the joke now, but there was a joke I remembered from way back in the day. Not way back in the day, but other than that, I hadn't heard any of it. So is this all new stuff?
Yeah, actually, I did something I've never done before. In the pandemic, I was off for almost a year really, and I did a couple of like corporate Zoom shows sort of at the end of that range.
Yeah.
And it was weird. I just couldn't make myself go back and relearn the old jokes. I never had this sensation in my body before. I was just like,
Huh.
I'm done with it. So I literally, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions, just retired everything from the before times, and I made it a goal. I was like, look, I'm trapped in the house anyway.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can work, work, work. And I did one of those nowhere comedy specials.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was online, and I was reading stuff, and it was mostly friends and family that come to something like that. And I had that sort of on the calendar, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see if I can retire everything and start over. And I literally that having that on the calendar, I worked and worked and worked and worked,
Ooh.
and that helped me to kind of feel like, oh, it's possible. And I the first time I did, I went back to Fresno, a place that's very friendly to me, and it was definitely like a bunch of Costaki fans, and it was terrifying. And I did, having not done comedy live for a year, I did a new hour also at the same time.
A
It
whole
was
hour.
it
Yeesh.
was insane. It was insane, and I can't believe it worked. And it wasn't fantastic, but it was good enough that it was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then I just worked it, worked it, worked it, and the special is some of the best chunks from that.
Yeah, it started off a great oftentimes when I listen to your comedy, I probably told you this before. It's like, man, I wish I wrote that. I wish I thought of that. The spelling bee
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
I guess when your name is whatever, Narith, son of
Navneet Morali. Yeah.
right, you're into the spelling. There's no Bob Smiths out there.
Right. Yeah. So it was a cool adventure for me. I had never done that before. And then I ended up having a later in the arc, I had a big chunk of stuff about getting divorced. And I opted to leave that out of this choice. I
Right.
was like, that doesn't really fit the brand and the demo. And like, all right, I'll save that for another time, another place. So it ended up being like kind of the highlights that weren't that subject from the hour that I was doing.
Yeah, yeah. And I can't remember. I specifically told myself I only recognize one joke. And it was a really quick one. It might have been a one-liner or something. And I was like, I'm not gonna forget it. Why should I write it down? Of course I'll remember it. And now I can't.
You know what I bet it is? I bet it's I'm allergic to cats.
Yes, that's it.
That
Yeah, yeah.
that that was a one liner that I had like at the beginning of time, and
Yeah.
then I ended up doing a chunk about allergies
Allergies. Yeah,
on
fit perfectly.
on the special. So I was like, I can bring that one line back. It fits here so well.
That's a cool thing too. I've had that before where I write a new bit, I'm starting to do it, and then it's probably improv on stage. I pull a bit from way back in the day. I'm like, oh, that fits perfectly.
Right.
And I
It's
don't
a
do it
nice
anymore.
find.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like finding $5 in your jeans. You're like, oh, that's nice.
Right, right, right. That's yeah, it's like the missing piece of the puzzle, right? Almost like you have it in the living room all set up and you're missing that one piece, and then 2 years later,
Yeah.
it's under the
I,
couch.
you know what? I saw Carlin do that once, and it made me think like, that's acceptable behavior. It's like he's a guy who was known for just turning it over and cranking out material and content forever. But he would sometimes like there would just be a line that he would take and he would use it to get to something else, and he didn't seem to blink about that. And I was like, all right, good
Yeah.
enough for George. I could do that.
That's it, and getting rid of not getting rid of, but writing a whole new hour too. I think I was first sort of exposed to the process, or at least the not the concept, the Seinfeld special, one of his firsts, where he throws everything out, and he
Right,
starts anew. It was with the documentary comedian.
right.
Where he, just like the rest of us, he drives around in his Porsche trying out new material at comedy clubs. But he's bombing, and they show him being heckled or not listened to, and stuff like that. And
Right.
and I, I don't know how you did the whole hour, man. I struggle with like doing 10 minutes of new stuff in front of.
I do too. This is not I don't mean it as a brag because it's the only time I've ever done it, and I don't know if it will ever happen again. But it was just the stars aligned and my own feelings and the
Yeah, yeah,
not being
yeah.
able to go do it for a while. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna at least take a swing at it. And now I kind of have the opportunity to do it again, and now it's kind of terrifying all over again because I did the dry bar, and I also recorded the album, which again has some of the dry bar stuff, and then this whole other like
Mhm.
25 minutes of stuff. And there's another chunk that's kind of adult and edgy that didn't fit the branding of dry bar. And so all that stuff is on the album. And now I'm sort of freed from having to worry about keeping that stuff in tip top shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's on something. I have it sort of down somewhere, and I can keep those jokes or I can let them go. And there's certainly space to grow and play and goof
Mhm.
around again, which is really nice. That's the most fun part. When you're preparing to do a thing, it's not quite as fun as
Right.
no one is requiring me to do anything tonight. I can just play and call audibles and just land what seems to be the good choice in the moment. Right? That's the
Yeah.
best. That's the best stand-up fun for me.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the key to filming something really good too, because even gigs that I do where I bring a video camera, the nights that I don't videotape it, I feel so much more relaxed.
Right? It's so weird.
And
It's
it's
so
like
weird.
and then I'll have a set where I'm like, I wish I would have recorded it, but I bet you it wouldn't have been the same set.
Right. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if this is true, but I feel like the trick to that is just to always record so that you can kind of get into the mode of like, I don't care. It's not the old days where you're paying for the tape, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
You just
yeah.
turn it on and throw it away later unless it's great.
And then when you start playing around with these bits over time too, it's like if you record something, especially dry bar or any kind of special, if you're still doing the bit, sometimes it grows and gets better and more lines, and you kind of watch if a clip's posted, you're like, oh, it's so much better now
Right, 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 right.
than it was.
Yeah. I it must be torture for actors and directors and people, they sort of pick one version of it and it's stuck there forever in time. And they must be haunted because they know there's a better they would have chosen a different version, or now I would have done this a different way, or whatever it is. Like, especially the movies that are sort of iconic, people know the lines and they know you from that. Like,
Right,
if you
right.
feel a little like, well, that was sort of a B minus take,
Yeah.
that
Right,
must
right.
bug me forever.
And you don't get to pick the take. You have no choice in the
Right,
matter. It's
right, right. That's actually one of the things I like about Dry Bar. They're very comic friendly as far as getting input and talking to like, is there any way to pull this one phrase out where I sort of stumbled, or
yeah.
boy, it sure would be nice if this was a tighter shot, and they're amenable to that. I think it's great.
Yeah, yeah. I and I feel a little bit what you're talking about so in the general area where I live in, I'll get a nice draw. I'll do, get an independent room and do door deals and stuff. And there's a lot of pressure annually because the same folks, 70% of the same folks come year after year.
Oh, right.
And I'm like, how much can I churn over in a year? So especially last year, I remember developing a new 20. And I was like, that's 20 of the at least 45 I'll do. And then I put together a slideshow of my of family, just funny family pictures from when I was born through teenage years, and then put to be continued and kind of did this slideshow thing with jokes about these different pictures and whatnot. And that went great.
Oh, cool.
And then but I felt that enormous pressure. Like I'm thankful it's sold out, but I hope you like the massage bit because
It's coming back, baby. Yeah,
did you
I'm
have to
familiar.
argue for Hitler to remain in your act?
You know, it surprised me. They didn't seem to have a problem with that. I actually ran that by them ahead of time. And she goes, I think that's going to be fine. And after you know, you do two tapings in the same night. And after the first one, I was like, are we sure we're good with the closer? And she was like, yeah. I was like, all right.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
The cancer Hitler joke is the closing bit on the dry bar special.
Right, right, right. And I'm surprised they let you keep in the it was the euphemism or you said it wasn't. I wish that wasn't or I wish that was a euphemism.
Oh, I'm surprised they let me keep that too. And there was only one thing that I kind of pressed for that I lost. It was there's a second part of the it's a it's a it's a slightly it's a sex joke, but it's about a married couple. It's like a dude who
Right.
wants to see his wife naked. That's it. It's that there's
Hmm.
nothing more than that. And for whatever reason, they said no to that and yes to a couple other things that if I was running the boat, you know, I would do it a different way. But you know, I get it. These are all delicate dances.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a gig once at a venue that was it's faith-based venue. I was recording for DVD back in the day, and this guy that I'd never worked with before was like, "Yeah, I do churches," and I saw on his social media he does churches, and then he opened, not open, he did a bit about being in the naked, well, being in the shower with his wife and then peeing on her, and the whole crowd was just like staring at him. I'm like, I'm in the back, like trying to, we're about to film this for a DVD. I'm like,
Well, that's you know, that's part of the art of being a comic is to figure out what fits in the situation, right?
right,
Like I just did a couple of ship gigs, which I hadn't done in 5 years, and they're so different. And something that is totally tame enough to do in a comedy club
mm-hmm,
is a little too edgy for a ship, you know, as a generalization. Not always, but
right.
uh,
Because you have the
you know,
different shows on the ship. You have the adult show, and then sometimes you have the kid, not for
yeah,
kids, but open to kids.
yeah, they call it family friendly, and sometimes the front row is like a handful of little children. It's
ugh,
not unusual to have lots of kids in those shows. So it totally changes the dynamic. And actually, in a weird way, once you get over the immediate horror, it's kind of fun because it's so different from what you normally do.
right,
Uh, but yeah, like I used to do a joke about a kid choking on a marshmallow, and it's totally clean. You could easily do it on Conan,
right,
but it sort of jokes about the death of a child, and so in a
right.
comedy club, nobody blinks because it's clearly a joke. But in a ship environment, in a family friendly environment, it's a little like, oh, that's kind of dark.
Right.
It takes them aback, you know.
Right. The
See
s'mores
that.
night has been canceled on this cruise.
And you forget that when you only do one kind of thing because most of my gigs are sort of one line. It's me doing comedy clubs or me doing, you
Yeah,
know, self-produced shows in places where they know me a little bit and I can get away with a lot even if it's, you know, most of the time the jokes are somewhat clean anyway, but some of them have a lot of bite in them. And I
sure.
kind of forget that until I'm in an environment like a corporate or a cruise ship where I'm like, yeah, I never thought about it. I could do this joke on Conan, but it's kind of mean, or it comes off as a little whatever, dark or sexist, or you
Right.
know, well, you know, you when you see it through different glasses, you're like, oh, right, I understand why that's touchy.
Yeah. And so do you kind of stick in talking to Tom Simmons, our mutual friend? Or maybe you're not friends with him anymore. Uh,
Love
um,
Tom Simmons.
yeah, of course. He talked about, you know, uh, especially in the beginning of him doing ships, he would just kind of he would write out these sets. So he'd name it like family,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
his stuff about his son and wife, or and then not food, but I'm just as an example, like this set's all about whatever. And the ship could actually name it and tell the passengers what it's about or whatever. So it helps you memorize too. What am I? Because you can't repeat jokes, right?
Yeah, again, I haven't done ships in a long time, and I just did 2 weeks recently, so it's in my head, and it's very like that first few days is overwhelming because you
Yeah.
basically get on the ship and they go, okay, you're doing do 20 adult in the thing in the theater, and then you have a 40-minute adult in the club, and then you have a 40-minute family in the club, and ideally none of those cross over. And I'm like, wait, what?
Right.
that's a that's 100 minutes. And it's not just the time, it's figuring out how it all works. Because, like, what I made the classic rookie error on the first night, I did an adult show and I came out swinging with adult, and they were like, hold on, we don't know you yet.
Right. Right.
Because I was trying to save all the family friendly for the other show.
Oh,
So
you
I
mean
wanted to,
within that show, within that at the adult show when it's
yeah, within the adult show, you still need to build some rapport before you start being too adult, which of
right.
course you do. You would do that in any comedy
Yeah.
environment. But I
Yeah.
was so focused on saving the clean for the family thing that I wanted to carve that out, save it for the other thing. And then I was a little too adult, which is an interesting problem on an adult show. But all these little things, like Tom does them a lot, so he's good at them,
Yeah.
and he's prolific and he understands the situation and he's good at mixing it up. And very often in the modern ship situation, there's a place that's on the ship that's set aside mostly for stand-up comedy.
Hmm.
And so people self-select and come back to that, which is one of the things that's nice about the ships now. At least there's some level of selecting to pick comedy. In the old
Right.
days, they would just throw you in the theater in front of,
Right. This is what you're doing
1,500
next,
people.
folks.
Right. So at least now there's a little bit of self-selection. The downside is sometimes they love comedy and they come back over and over. And now you can't do, I mean, it's impossible to do 300 different minutes. I mean, it is for me.
Right.
um, so the trick I found, which kind of surprised me, is I was on Alaska. It's basically a Seattle up and down to Alaska and back kind of cruise. And like 93% of them were Americans and they loved the football jokes.
Yeah.
So I just put my head down and I was writing and writing and working on football jokes. And it sort of lends itself to a little bit of crowd worky. I'm like, who are the teams you guys like? Oh, boom. Seahawks. Mess with that guy. How did he become a
Right.
fan? Do the 5 Seahawks jokes that I have. And then I could do that kind of over and over again because every time it was different, right? There
Right.
would be some Panthers fans and Cowboys, and it was mixed. And I would make a point of making fun of Aaron Rodgers no matter what they said, and it was fun.
I totally wish I was in that crowd. I pray, and this is a selfish, awkward comic watching an awkward I want to be in the show when you do that, and they're only yelling out stuff you've already done, so you pretend someone said. People are like, Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Bills, Bears. Who said Bears?
Actually, I should actually make that a kind of a part of it where I have an out. I go, oh yeah, yeah. There's
The
always a Cowboys fan, so that's fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen comics do that. Like the crowd obviously didn't say something, and they're like, "Who said pumpernickel?" No, I'm in the back, like nobody said it.
Here come the pumpernickel jokes.
Speaking of pumpernickel, that Jim McMahon, quarterback of the Bears, he.
Yeah,
But you did,
the ships are an interesting challenge. You don't have to be a I don't know. I don't know if this is true, but it feels true. You have to be a grizzled veteran to pull it off and do it well.
yeah,
You don't have to be the best comic in the history of the world, but you have to be a grown up who's done it forever in
yeah,
order to have the menu of choices and in order to understand the nuance and having separate openers and closers for all these different sets. and being able to handle being clean and being able to give them something that feels adult, even if you're not a particularly dirty comic. You have to do something that feels like, oh, this is the adult show, right?
Mm.
So that's sometimes a problem for guys like a Tom Ryan. You know, they don't have adult jokes per se because they've been writing these clean TV jokes for 40 years.
Yeah, I don't know how I would make mine adult, my show. Just curse
Right.
every once in a while.
Yeah. I mean, you don't, there's not a requirement that it be that, but it is advertised as that. So it feels like you got to do a little something that feels
Yeah.
naughty. And then of course there are lots of guys that would kill in the adult situation and could never put together 40 minutes clean. Right.
Right. Right.
So you know,
Sometimes
they're an
ships
interest.
advertise too. It's a repeat show, right? So if you're doing the same, they'll go say this is the same show as it was Tuesday or something like that.
Well, they'll at least market it as this is the family friendly show, and that happens a couple times during the
Okay.
week. And then there's an adult show in the same venue, and that happens maybe 3 times in the same week. So their request to the comics is that don't overlap jokes between the family friendly and the adult because they're in their heads. People will come to one of each of those kind of thing,
Right.
and you don't want those to be the same show.
I trying to make my show adult show reminds me of a thought I had. So at one point, I do quite a few golf and country clubs, and one person complained that I was too clean. This was an audience member, so the booker was like, if you could just spice it up a bit for the second show, and I was like, you don't know, you hired a clean comic, I don't know what. And then I did a comedy festival recently where some of the panelist industry folks were like, we'd like to see a little bit more edgy stuff. The days of shirt and tie suit comedian are over.
Wow,
And
so interesting.
I know, I was like, so I was like, I don't know. I was like, how would I ever? I think it would kind of be funny, almost Norm Macdonaldish if I just did my normal show and then in between bits, just, I'm like, abortion. And then, but I was at Burger King and it just named, Democrats and Republicans, huh?
Touchy subjects, yeah.
Just yelling out touch and then just moving on without addressing them.
Immunity.
Yeah. Transgender, huh? All right. I mentioned earlier before we started recording that my siblings and I are debating on whether we should poke fun at a relative who posted on social media. Today's 4th of July. Happy 4th, buddy.
Yeah, happy Independence Day, everybody.
Um, this person posted on social media, thank you to all who served. Happy 4th. And fourth is
Yep.
in quotes. I don't know why. I guess they kind of, I don't know,
It's like
served.
the joke about the cop cars that have to protect and served, and it's in quotes. So it makes it sound
It's sarcastic. It's like,
yeah, sarcastic cops. Yeah,
yeah,
we're here to protect and serve. That's what we're here
yeah,
for.
I'm here to serve you this beating. But yeah, who's serving? That's what this person put. Thank you to all who served. I guess we did fight for our independence, so
Yeah, I mean those people. That's nobody knows those people. Those people are long gone. But there was there was some doing to be done to
yeah,
get to the freedom part. So yeah, I understand the premise. They don't
yeah.
mean serve at Cracker Barrel, right? I did that.
I like how, but I think, yeah, the person is going back a bit. They typically thank you for those that served as Memorial Day, Veterans Day. It's
Right. Yeah.
reserved for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I hear you. It feels so far away now.
Right. I don't know.
Thanks for throwing the tea in the harbor, etc.
Right. I don't know. And then fourth in quotes is my favorite. It is in fact the fourth. I don't know. You have to put that in the quotes.
It's funny how some of the holidays are just like we just connect them so much to the date that it becomes the name of the thing.
Like, well, what do you mean?
Cinco de Mayo,
Oh,
4th of
right.
July. You don't even say what the thing is anymore.
Right.
It's it's become so associated with that day that doesn't even you don't even say it with the thing.
Right. Right. Well, maybe it's like it's the corporation. That's because that's their sale day or something. It's all built around the date and when something happens that
Well, it's
benefits.
handy. Some of the holidays move. They're not the same date, right? Thanksgiving is confusing because it's not always it moves around.
Yeah, we're thankful on different days in November. And now there's well, Columbus Day is now Indigenous People Day, but it's still on the calendar, both holidays.
Right.
And now we have Juneteenth. That's a
Oh
federal
yeah.
holiday.
Yeah, yeah. Wait, are there any others that move? I felt like there's Easter moves. And Easter's weird for Greeks because it's the Greeks use the old calendar and it's not the same Easter as the American Easter most of the time. So
Huh,
it's extra tricky for the Greeks.
interesting. Yeah, that's
I,
I think that's the only two, Thanksgiving and Easter. Memorial Day, Veterans Day, same, Christmas, same. Um,
Halloween is always is a date.
right,
um,
right, right, right.
but even like
31st.
the President's Day or whatever, that's not a day. That's the first Monday of whatever, right?
Oh
It's
yeah,
a
Memorial Day too, I guess. Veterans
yeah. So
Day.
it moves. It's not associated with a date. Labor Day.
They couldn't come up with a better name than Juneteenth.
Yeah, that one's a little
I don't
cumbersome.
even know what that means.
At
I mean,
least
I
you know
know what
what
the
it
holiday
is.
means.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear more in your special about, and I'm hoping you'll spill the beans on this podcast. Is who are you talking about in Seattle at the comedy competition that repeated the joke
Oh,
several
that's fun.
times?
That's a funny question.
Come on, tell me who it was. It Bevins?
No, it was oh, it's funny. I'm blanking on his name. I've got a mental image of his face now. He's a great comic. It's he travels around with Stanhope a bunch. It's Andy Andrist.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
You know Andy? Andy
Uh-uh.
was to tell the people who are listening now, Andy was I did the same thing the next year in San Francisco. He was a white guy with some good jokes, not particularly energetic, a little bit green, and did well and just got lost in the shuffle. Because
Huh.
when you're in those big competitions, sometimes, especially in the early rounds, it's very easy to go, oh, the hilarious fat guy and the crazy lady with the dress. You know, there's a couple of styles or looks or people kind of stand out. And then there's a couple guys who just murder. And then everyone else is like fighting to survive and get into the next,
Yeah.
get in there. And so Andy just lost that battle one week and came in 10th out of 10 of us like 3 or 4 nights in a row. And he went out and got hammered before a show and repeated a joke, and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And he literally didn't know it, and the crowd's like all like looking at each other, and he just plows on to the next thing.
I wonder if in his head, each time he told that joke, he said to himself in his head, that typically goes better.
And I literally went on right after him and opened with that joke, and
Oh,
it just
great.
like it killed. It was like the perfect choice in the moment. So literally the next year I went because I did well in Seattle. I think I came in fourth. It was Mitch Hedberg won, and Augie Smith was like, we were all just competing for second.
Right.
Augie Smith, I think, landed in second place, and I came in fourth. And it starts with like 35 guys, so it's a pretty cool thing to make it to the last five. So the next year I did San Francisco, and I did exactly the Andrus model of had a couple weird sets, did okay, but just got lost and busted out the first week. It happens all the time. It's
Yeah.
not a measure of. I think you have to be a great comic to win those things, but great comics definitely don't win those things. You know what I
Right.
mean?
But in the comedy festival I was in Reese this year, last month, um, I did not make it past a certain round in the competition, and one of the judges was like, I don't know how you didn't make it through." And in my head, I'm like, you were one of the judges. You tell me. I don't
Judging comp, I mean, it is a terrible construct, and there's actually Ted Alexandra, I believe, just won't do competitions because he's against them in theory. Like he doesn't think that you should make an artistic thing into a competition. He thinks that's a bad idea. And I agree with that. But I also, sometimes you dive in and embrace the thing for what it is. It is a terrible construct for sure.
Didn't Ted try to start a union?
I don't know. That sounds like something Ted would do.
Yeah, we
Maybe.
started to try. I think it was years ago in New York. Or tried to do a comedy union to get like a minimum pay for sets and all that stuff. And
I don't know. That definitely happened. I don't know if Ted was involved with that, but that's
Oh,
totally up his
interesting.
alley.
Doesn't want a
I did it.
competition. Yeah.
I was gonna say I did it. I've done so many of these kind of things over the years, and they are, I did Last Comic Standing one time, and it's New York City. There's, you know, 500 really
Ye-
good comics,
Yeah.
and another 1,000 after that that are pretty good. And I made it into they make you go and audition. You do 1 minute in front of no one at
Right.
noon. Made it onto the night show. I did quite well. And then they picked 10 of us to go to LA, and I didn't make the cut. And after the show, Lonzo Bowden was one of the judges, and
Yeah.
I knew him a little bit from before. And we're kind of hanging and talking. He goes, "Hey man, for whatever it's worth, you're the next one on the list." And there was a
11.
pause, and then we both like gut laughed. Like, what am I supposed to do with that information? I'm
Right.
number 11. Like,
Right. So does that mean I should get my flight on standby in case 1 through 10 have the flu or something?
you're number 11. That's the compliment I got from the show.
You were almost better than the worst person we thought of.
That was the night that I'll tell you this story. There's a little comedy story for you. I don't know if you've ever done one of these. Did you ever do Last Comic?
I have a last comic standing story. I'll wait for when you're done. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I got a few, but this is the one that comes to mind here. They do these horrific holds where to build the drama. It's they're taping, and it's a live audience, but they definitely are running it like a TV show where they'll pause and go, "Hey, we're going to do one more take of this," and they stop everything, and
Right.
they do these dramatic holds where they put all the comics on the stage, and they go, "One more golden ticket to LA and go to Hollywood where all your dreams are going to come true, and the rest of you are going to stay here and kill yourselves, and that last person is, there's some." And then they pause for like way too long. I'm sure they edit it later, and they just want all the space, and then they cut
Right.
it down to the right amount of space.
Right.
I'm on stage with Keith Alberstadt, who's a buddy of mine,
Yeah.
and and the last person to go, it's this big thing. Then there's a pause, and I lean over to Keith and I go, "They're going to say Costaki, Economopoulos." We're kind of trying to keep it light. And the guy, this is a direct quote. The guy goes, "Bob Smith." That's the opposite of Costaki, Economopoulos. Bob Smith went, not me.
Right. Right. I I like Keith Alberstadt. I think I may have told you this story last time we chatted. This is not my last comic standing story, but I developed a fake friendship with Keith Alberstadt in my head.
You just liked him so much, you daydreamed about it.
So I believe I may have met him before. I'm not sure, but throughout me going from MC to feature, and then I was a full-time feature for a little bit of time and working the zones in the southeast. So was Keith, and I would constantly be told by headliners and MCs like you and Keith are clean, clever. I don't know that they said original, but just the same kind of humor,
Yeah, you
different
guys stood out.
delivery. I was
Right.
constantly like, "Oh, you're like Keith. Keith's like whatever." And if Zone needed a clean comic, they would one of five of us would go in, and it would be him. So all these years, I've been a fan of his, and kind of I don't know over the years, just like so. Then I go this. Fast forward a decade, and he's headlining a club in Jacksonville, not the Zone. It was another one at the time, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go see him. And I kind of go up to him like, "Hey, man, how are you?" He goes, "Hey, Keith, what's your name?" or whatever. Like he introduced himself, and in my head, I immediately realized I'm like, I don't know him.
That's really funny.
Like I thought we were, I don't know. It's a weird thing. But for last comic standing, I did it in Nashville at Zany's, and I go up and it's snowing out. We're waiting in line for hours and hours, probably close to 8 hours outside.
Right. Oh,
Snow is building on our shoulders. We're huddling up. I remember a bunch of guys were there, Mike Speenberg, and some others. And then
oh yeah.
actually see Tom Simmons just go in front of the front of the line, just go in. And then I see some others, and that's when I kind of learned back in that, oh, people have managers and agents, and they have an appointment. And one of them was John Heffron,
Oh yeah.
who I think won that year. And then I finally get in, do my 60 seconds in front of two judges. One laughed, one didn't. I didn't make it through. Um, and then I kind of hang out. I believe I came back for the show. In any event, at the end of the night, I see John Heffron leaving in the same car as the two judges and the producer.
It's a good sign.
I was like, and then he ends up winning. I'm like, okay, this is a little different than I expected from my inexperience, you know,
Well, I mean, the competition is a part of what's happening, but they're
making a
building a
good TV show.
television show, right?
Yeah,
And they want demographic representatives from all walks of life, and of course most comics are look like you and me.
right.
And that's not what they want the mosaic of, the lineup to be. And so there's a lot of things going on. They definitely want youth, and they want an old guy to tell the story, and they want,
Yeah.
they
Want
they want
the ex
silly. And
homeless person.
yeah, they definitely anything that has a story is interesting to them,
Yeah,
which
I
I
learned.
get.
I mean, and I learned a similar thing from Billy Gardell. He would say, sometimes he would hear, "We already have the fat white guy,"
Right.
So, and which frustrates me. I've had, and I'm kind of writing a rant or bit about this now, kind of like working on it. I've probably had half a dozen meetings with agents and managers, some of them who sought me for a meeting for representation, who at the end of all, I don't know if it's four, five or six meetings just said, "We love what you're doing. You're hilarious, but you really need to work on your social media account.
Oh yeah,
You don't
that's
have
the
enough
new that's the new
followers."
problem, right? Right.
And I go,
Because
"Well,
that's the measure of how you're succeeding right now. It's so
but
awful.
so they always like, well, I said, what if I'm really bad at marketing myself? And they're like, well, if you can't market yourself, how am I supposed to? I'm like, I don't know. What does a manager do? Like, well, we help you get into bigger venues. If you have 300,000 followers, we'll help you get into bigger venues. And I wanted to say to him, like, if I had 300,000 followers, do I
Right.
need help getting into?
No, you don't. Right.
So
That's
I don't
right.
get it. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a part of the decision calculus that they're when they're making decisions now, and
Here's how
it's pretty
forget.
off.
Here's how forgettable I am. I am at the comedy festival and they're doing a like sort of a panel Q&A, maybe 100 people in the room. And beforehand, I went up and introduced myself to this guy who runs the comedy festival out in Phoenix, and he represents some comics. And we just kind of chatted, introduced myself. He's like, "Thanks so much for." So it gets to his point in the panel where everybody's quiet and talking, and he goes, talked about how networking is so important. He goes, we were before we started there for 30 minutes. One person in this room introduced themselves to me as a panelist. One person took the time to get to know my name. I got to know him, what he's about. And he goes, buddy, where, where are you, buddy? And I'm like, you know, so I was literally 30 minutes, 45 minutes ago. He doesn't remember my name, and I'm the only one
You're the
that
example, and he still doesn't know.
Yeah, I'm the example. This kid, the guy, the straight white guy. I was like, I need a hook or something.
I need eye catcher.
Yeah,
That's funny.
hamburger.
Yeah. But yeah, the demographic thing is, and I'm from the world where I want all the demographics to get all the chances. And I
Right.
agree with the premise that the white man has had all of the advantages for all of history enough already. But it's also ridiculous the way that they do it. I did one show that was it was a stand-up show over and over and over again. And I literally saw the producer had a clipboard, and each show was blocked out, and he literally had different color magic markers, and he had pink for gay, and he had brown for Latino, and he like literally, and he had a female, and he had a thing. It literally, that's the way that they look at booking a show. And of course most of the stand-up comics are white guys.
Yeah. How do I different? I mean, I'm funny. That's great. I never thought being funny is not at the top of the list for agencies and representation when they're
It's
looking
one
for.
of the things, but it's not the thing. That's what's frustrating. Yeah.
I remember years and years ago, you told me a story of somebody you were not arguing with or conversating with, where you said to the comedy club owner, "So if I read a joke book on stage, but I sold out, you would have me back?" And he was like, "Yeah."
I love to talk to club owners about that kind of thing. I find it fascinating because even the ones who are really hardcore, like it's all about the art and the craft of comedy,
Mhm.
they still have to run a business, right?
Right.
And of course, there's the other extreme that doesn't care at all about the
Right.
art and they just didn't get a permit for a strip club or whatever.
Right.
And most club owners are somewhere in between. And I find it so interesting to talk to a club owner about, how many of these Dustin Diamond kind of guys do you have to book to survive,
Right.
And of course, sometimes a club will like accidentally find something that works well with for them. They're the club in Morty's. Do you remember that one on the north side of Indianapolis?
No.
The prior club owner they had a situation where they got an offer to get, I think it was Damon Wayans, and it was like a big risky thing where it was a $50,000 guarantee, and the club had never done anything like this, and it
Right.
ended up being like a gigantic success for them. Cut to now they've got the calendar is peppered with black comics and they never booked it that way before, and they're giving away tickets on the black radio stations, and
Mhm.
they just completely shifted because of something that worked for them financially. Like, I get it. And of course now the modern situation is a YouTube star and a TikTok star and an Instagram guy. These are the guys who can come in and sell it out on a Tuesday. Well, that's great news for a club. Of course you
Yeah.
understand why they're interested in that, but you have to at least balance that with the knowledge that if people are coming to your restaurant, that the food's going to be good, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want a TikTok star who's terrible on stage, right? That's not good for business long run.
Right. I've opened for some of those influencers, and they had more questions for me about comedy, or probably the same number of questions for me about comedy that I did about social media for them.
Yeah, you guys should do seminars for each other.
I know, and it was like they're making, 7 grand tonight, and I got a chicken sandwich in the back
Right.
as a thank you or whatever.
That's right. That's modern comedy, buddy.
They're doing comedy for, 7 years. I'm like, "Oh, that's nice."
Yeah, 7 years probably seems like an eternity to them.
Yeah, that I've yeah, I've even seen some of them like, I gotta take a break, burn
Yeah.
out,
Yeah, right.
burn out." I would love, I wanted in your special, I wanted to hear more celebrity stories because you talked about Seinfeld and Ron White, I think.
Yeah.
And that must have been surreal, the Jerry Seinfeld one, doing a club in New York where there's less than 20 people there and he pops in.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. And actually in New York, that kind of thing is not really an outlier story. That kind
Right.
of thing happens all the time. I was in that same club another night and Chris Rock came in and stood there flat-footed with no performance and read jokes to the audience, like with no,
Mhm.
not repeating the premise like he does, and not
Right.
not big and bouncy, just like but just seeing if anything has resonance. I mean, that kind of thing happens a lot, especially at the good clubs in New York. But
I think
yeah, I
I'd have a
love
hard
those kind
time
of
keeping
moments.
my composure around Jerry.
Yeah, I was, I didn't say this in the thing, but I told him the story that night. I go, you were on the poster advertising the college comedy competition the first time I ever did stand up. He goes, it was a thing with certs and Doritos that at college, and the prize was to be judged by you at the end if you made it to the national thing. And he kind of tipped his head back and looked up at the ceiling and goes, I remember that.
Huh.
That was a long time ago. That was probably 1989,
Right, right.
90 maybe.
And then he just does his set and leaves, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, he comes in, he lets them know he's there. They put him on right away and he walks right out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he was working on jokes he was doing at the Academy Awards, and he did about 10 minutes, and you could tell like he's like puts the movie jokes are like right in the middle. He's doing the work.
Hmm.
Then he finds something to close on and moseys on out of there.
I had Chris Rock interrupt me on stage.
Oh,
Um, which is interesting that he got interrupted on stage, but uh it was when he was hosting the Oscars, so that year. And it was same year Jacksonville had the Super Bowl. So the whole week was a zoo in Jacksonville because the Super Bowl's in town.
oh wow.
And I'm featuring at the Comedy Zone, and at the time it was Tuesday through Saturday, if you remember. You had an interesting conversation with the former owner of the Comedy Zone about language, and
I was just thinking that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And over your shoulder or his shoulder is a picture of Carlin or whatever.
Right.
But so Tuesday night, the owner's like, Rock's gonna come in, he's gonna pop on and do a set. And so I don't even know what night it was, but the first few nights went by with nothing. Then I'm on stage, a sold out crowd, 350 people. I'm 15 minutes into my 30, and I think I'm pretty good at telling people the truth when I say I'm crushing, I'm killing, I'm dying up there. I was doing very, very well. Very well. Family's there, friends are there, so it had to be a Friday or Saturday. And I just see rustling behind the stage, kind of shadows, and it feels weird. I do a setup to a joke, and as I do it, the crowd stands to its feet and starts clapping. And for a minute second, I'm like, wait till I get to the punchline. And it was Chris Rock came out right on stage, and he's smaller than me. I'm 5'10", and he's a little smaller. And I kind of just look at him, and I remember I dropped the microphone, not physically, but to my side. Like I didn't keep it up near my mouth. I was in shock. And he just leans over and he goes, "Hey man, you mind if I do a little time?" And I wish I had the microphone up because they heard him. At this point, they're quiet now because
Right.
I leaned over and I was like kind of in the middle of something. And so I just hand him the microphone and he does his whatever, and then he immediately leaves. But then the headliner had to follow that, and the crowd was buzzing or whatever. But come to find out, he went backstage and the MC was sitting back there, and he says to the MC, he goes, "Hey, are you the headliner?" He goes, "No," and then he points to me on stage and goes, "Is that the headliner?" And he goes, "No," and he just walked on stage. So
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
you get to that level, you got license to kind of wander in and do whatever you want. It's interesting that I guess it makes sense, but it is interesting to me that we accept that as the premise of, and I've been in the tiniest version of that with Caroline.
yeah,
I would go places with her, and she would be a thing, and they would swoop us in, and we could do sets in the middle of something and then run away when we were done. It was like, oh,
yeah.
I see the appeal of this situation.
Of course. And you guys took me into the cellar once, the two of you.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
remember, she was like, can we get these guys up? And I forget the woman's name who books it. She's like, where do you want me to put you in between Attell, Colin Quinn,
right,
Burr,
right, yeah,
Seinfeld?
yeah.
You want me to put up Danny Johnson? Is that? uh,
It's
oh,
fair
man.
question.
But Ron White was the private jet, right? How nice is that? I didn't know you got the chance to do that with him. That's pretty cool.
It was great. I went on the bus with him a little bit too. He's got, at the time, this has been years ago now,
How did you
but
connect with them first? Do you know him from the past?
no, actually, they booked me. They reached out to me on purpose because they wanted me to work with them and maybe write with them.
Okay, okay.
And I did some of that, and it turns out he's a great comic and a great dude. I don't mean to disparage him, but his process is a little nutty. He really won't read jokes.
Right. He wants to see them, right?
He wants, at the time, his standing offer was he wanted jokes on DVD.
Hmm.
So he would watch them, and if he liked them, he would pay really top dollar
Right, right.
for finished
I
bits.
heard this. I heard this. Yeah.
And even, I don't know if this is talking out of school or not, but he even bought like some like closing chunks of like kick the door down headliners from the 80s who had moved on to something else.
Right. Right.
So he was buying jokes and building new hours and working on stuff. And
And people do. I mean, this is not uncommon for those listening, right? I mean,
no,
people
it's
people
not. This
do that.
is yeah, yeah. Once you, I mean, you spend 20 years building an hour, and then they film it and people come to see you. They can't do the hour anymore.
Right.
And it takes some doing to get to that next hour, and then to do it again and again and again. I mean, if you
Yes.
if you get to that level of success, you need some help for sure. So they booked me to maybe write with them. And uh actually Simmons and I, they gave us a few subjects, and Simmons and I wrote like 15 pages of jokes on those subjects, is kind of
Mhm.
in his voice, sent them off. They're like, he doesn't really like to work that way. And when I worked with him, I wrote some other jokes that some tags, and there was one tag in particular, like he just slipped in perfect. It wasn't the best joke you've ever heard of, but it just fit perfectly,
Mhm.
and he got a really good response on the first time he said it. And he gave me a nod, went right back to the act. I mean, all that stuff was great fun. But ultimately, I said to the manager guy, I go, I'm a working comic. I'm not going to write a joke, build the joke, polish the joke, perfect the joke, then sell the joke. It doesn't make any
Right.
sense for me. And I shouldn't have said it so
Right.
quickly. I should have traveled around with him for a while.
Right. Right.
Because he actually said he was going to bring me to open for him at the Fox in Atlanta, which is like the theater and the place
Yes.
that I grew up. And of course, once I made it clear I wasn't going to work in that capacity, then that was it. I never
All right.
saw him again.
You and Simmons just burning bridges.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
No, he was great. He's a earnest, like he's a good comic and an earthy, cool dude. And I enjoyed the gigs I did with him. They were great
Yeah,
fun.
I hear on the Rogan show because he's in Austin now. I hear on the Rogan show at they constantly talk about how he's grinding stuff out at the mothership constantly. You
It's so
know,
funny because it was like a couple years ago he announced he was retiring, and he had a final farewell tour, and he
you
was like, "I'm
can't
done."
retire from this. It's
That's what I thought at the time. I was like, "What's he gonna do?"
yeah, yeah. I
Good for him. I'm glad he has another chapter. It's cool.
The football jokes are always a pleasure to hear. You have All Pro Lines podcast and social media pages where it's nothing but football. I was fortunate enough to be a guest. I don't even think I'll make the guest list this season with the Giants. I don't know who we even have to talk about.
I just had Al Romas on. He's a lifelong Giants fan.
Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
Not Al, it's Al Romas. Yeah, I read his book. His book reminded me when you started telling those stories about Seinfeld, and I was like, Costaki should write one of these memoir sort of tales of comedy. Because he talks about some guy with a guitar featuring for him doing really well, and at the end of the story, it's that guy is Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you hang around the business long enough, I got a few of those where I'm like, I knew Nick Schwartzen when he was like an open micer, came and talked to me and David Crow in the condo, like this wide-eyed 19-year-old kid who was asking us all the new guy questions. And I guess we answered them really well.
Yeah, you've helped launch many.
I knew Amy Schumer when she was a wide-eyed open micer, and now she's selling out Madison Square Garden. It's
Can you
crazy.
imagine the pressure? You talk about churning an hour over. Like Patton Oswalt in an interview said, unlike musicians, comedians, and I think he even said Chris Rock told him this, but like you said before, you develop an hour and you publish a special, you cannot then tour with that hour.
Right, right. You just have to flip it. You have to tour with the hour and then tape it, and then retire and then tour with the hour that you're building and then tape it.
Right.
It's not easy, but it's doable if you work hard and you build an audience that
Yeah.
likes you before you start. That's part of it.
My dry bar is from 2019, and I'm finding as I'm building this new hour and it's not a whole hour yet. So when I'm doing an hour, I go back into some of the older material. And for some of the folks, majority of folks who have not seen my dry bar, it seems like I'm doing new material. So if they saw me in the last 6 months, I'm doing the same 40. And then all of a sudden, oh, you got a new 20. I'm like, actually, it's from, I don't say that, but it's from 2000.
Yeah, well, it's all a delicate, you try, you build and you work and you got this little new part, and then that you have to lean on this part from before, and that's the closer that you wrote and way back, and it's all part of the deal, man. What I'm hoping happens is, speaking of Dry Bar, is that on the next one, if there's a next one, they let me do all football wall to wall. I think that'd be a fun theme to do the whole thing. And in
Yes.
fact, both of my specials, when I got to the little football chunk, it had a little more life than the other parts of the special, in my opinion. So I think it's an easy pitch. I just don't know if they'll go for it, but
I
I
think
think
like
branding wise, be
what I
good.
thought of when you did it in the dry bar, because they did a few cutaways to the crowd. The guys are for sure laughing, and the women are either because they know football or they're happy that the husband they dragged to this comedy show is laughing too. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
It was
Yeah.
like, I told you you'd have fun. I told you.
Yeah, ideally with the football jokes, it's I'm not doing X's and O's super specific stuff. It's
Right.
broad, sort of, you make fun of the good teams, and make fun of the bad team. You're doing jokes about the mascot name, and you try to make it accessible to all of the people. I was in all comedy, I always thought of like the Venn diagram of, you got good funny and crowd pleasing funny, and you're trying to get that little orange slice, right? Like in a MasterCard logo.
Right.
And I feel the same way about football jokes. You want it to please the hardcore fans and the passive people who don't necessarily follow all the details. And you're looking for that little slice where, you know, ultimately you want it to be accessible to the passive guy, and the hardcore guy loves it. That's the
Yeah. And
goal.
I love that I loved the Green Bay Packers joke died. Um,
You know what happened? I
well,
was gonna do
I don't know the reference though. I don't even know it though. I didn't look it up.
I was gonna do. I really blew it in that moment. I was gonna do the Aaron Rodgers chunk, and then I thought, no, that's gonna feel dated by the time this comes out. And I got head scrambled, and I went for an old reference that totally died. I can't. It's kind of funny we ended up leaving that in there. Uh, yeah. So that's how football jokes go. Sometimes you just go, well, shouldn't have done that one.
Right. Right. Is it the Avery family or something?
Yeah, making a murderer reference.
Um, I now have this habit, not habit, but I told you this on our podcast last time. I've taken on something that you do that initially made me think you were a psychopath. Um, I now eat bell peppers like an apple.
Ah, I love that.
So that's from years and years ago when you were at Shoemakers, I think. And Coco, no,
Shoemakers.
what's it? Not Shoemaker. The St. Pete house?
Oh yeah, coconuts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we stayed and wrote Bevins, you, Lennox, and before I even met you, I walk in and you're eating a bell pepper like an apple, and I thought this serial killer. I don't know. I've never seen anybody do it. Now I have it in my fridge now, and I'm like,
You're welcome.
so look, I do 5 questions at the end of each podcast. They're not lightning. They're just 5 questions I want to ask before we wrap it up. You cool with that? You got time?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Question number one. Besides me, who are your comedy influences?
Besides you, I mean, for me, number one has always been George Carlin, and I actually talked to him on the phone one time and got to tell him that. It was
I
so
remember.
cool. Yeah. So
Costaki.
yeah, for me, it's Carlin, easy number one. And then, I'm a comedy fan. I always have been. I love these guys. There's so many great ones, and not just guys. I love Sarah
Right.
Silverman, and there's Caroline Ray is a great stand-up comic.
Right. I like Maria Bamford. She really tickled my
Bamford's
funny
one of
bone.
my all-time favorites. In fact,
Yeah.
when I did the Melbourne Festival, I had the little pass where I could go see the other shows because I was in the fest, and it was cool, man. There are people from all over the earth at this thing. And I went to so many shows just as a fan. And Maria Bamford is the only thing I saw twice. I went back
Yeah.
again. Yeah, she's great.
I don't
Um,
know how these comics nowadays churn these hours so quickly. Nate Bargatze is coming, another hour's coming out, and seems like it's annually, if not quicker.
I think it's not annually in most cases, but it is quick on the timeline of what I would be comfortable with. They
And it's
do seem
good stuff.
Some of the big ones are doing it in a they're clicking, man. They're clicking. So
Yeah.
yeah, influence wise, I mean, I'm just a fan of stand up. I love Hedberg and I love Attell and Gaffigan and Burr and uh those are all some of my favorite, Greg Giraldo I think is
Oh,
underrated. There's some guys that along the way, their names people wouldn't know that were helpful to me, when I was a kid. Uh, and so you think about some of those kind of guys and watching, Lewis Black and getting to
yeah.
work with some of the big names has been cool. It makes it feel more accessible,
Yeah.
and then there are guys who do things that I could never do, like Frank Caliendo and Jimmy Pardo. Those guys are, to me, they're like aliens from another planet.
Hmm.
They're not really influences on me because I'm not doing that kind of thing, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
But mostly I learned that you could sit down, and when last year I went to see Chris Rock and David Tell like co-headlined a big ass, giant arena here in LA. And I'm not comparing myself to those guys, but I am saying when I watch guys like that, I see the path and I see like they are better than I am at all of the things.
Hmm.
But it's not by some gigantic chasm, They're workaday comics who are writing and perfecting good ideas that are interesting and funny. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
They do it at a higher level, but it doesn't seem like another planet to me.
Right.
It's
Right. No, I get that. I get that. Like yeah, it's not it's almost like I'm struggling for a comparison, but um unattainable is probably a bad word, but it's not so far from what
right.
you're, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something nice about seeing the very biggest and best, and it doesn't seem that far away sometimes.
Right. Right. All
Right.
right, question two. Can you think of, is there a moment in time or a period in time in your life as a child where you sort of recognize humor had its value or importance in your life? So, as an example, I remember the first joke I was ever told by my grandfather when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. The first street joke and how it just made him bellow with laughter. And then other people in the car laugh. And I'm like, and then I started repeating the joke and then bought joke books and as a kid and kind of realized I'm being the oldest of five, I'm getting this attention from humor. I think that's
Oh
where it
yeah.
started. So, is there anything like that in your life that you can think of?
It's funny. I don't, not consciously. I did, as when I was in middle school, I ended up having a spiral notebook of like street jokes because I found them interesting.
Uh
I
huh.
was fascinated that you could tell one, to this group of people at 4 p.m. on this moment in this time, and it gets a 7 level, haha. And then you tell the same joke to different people, a different time, a different space, and it's a 9. Like I was always fascinated that something could have that much swing, and if you told it, it's so dependent on so many different factors. But once I became a comic, there's a family story that would get told more often. When I was like a toddler, uh I said something and it made the room laugh. And I said, "What did I say? What did I say? Tell me. I want to say it again." Which, if that's not the origin story of a comedian,
Yeah.
I want to say it again. So funny.
Yeah, like so it was like when you do a new something new on stage. Like somebody write that down.
Yeah. 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 I would tighten it up and tell this again the next family outing.
The next the next question is something we sort of touched upon potentially. If you what do you wish was different about the industry as we know it today?
I think we've touched on a little bit. I
Yeah.
wish funny was the thing instead of one of the things. That's the easy version of the answer.
Right.
Um, I'm a little biased from where I'm sitting, but I do think there's an anti-age bias in show business for sure, and that bleeds a little bit into stand-up as well.
Hmm.
Comics like Laurie Kilmartin have been just so good and so funny forever. And there's a lot of guys like that. Danny Bevins is a good example. Tom
Hmm.
Simmons, Ted Alexandro. There's a lot of these characters that you can look at and go, is that person really not as good as fill in the blank. Nate Bargatze. Not to say Nate's not good, but
Right.
it is weird that Nate Bargatze is talking to 16,000 people
Right.
and Ted Alexandro is talking to 74. Well,
Right.
now how did the business pick that?
Right. Right.
That doesn't seem fair or reasonable.
Right.
So yeah, but nobody set out to prove that show business was fair. It's the gold standard of unfair, right?
Right. Right.
Nobody pretends it's fair.
Right.
So I get it. I understand.
Question 4: is there a sweet spot in your heart, a favorite place to perform?
Oh man, I got some favorites. I love Acme in Minneapolis. That place has been good to me for years and years and years. They really care about the process and the comics and the old Atlanta Punchline was just magic.
Yeah.
It's the new version's fine.
Right.
But the old one was like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is comedy.
I did the old one with Billy Gardell. He had me feature for him a couple times back in the
Oh,
day.
that's
So
great. Yeah, that club was really
it was
that was a
hot.
good one.
I
Yeah.
thought I walked away from those weeks thinking I was better than I was.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But you deserve that. I mean, for all the nights that you don't think you're as good as you are, you're allowed to have some of those.
Yeah. You know what I
Uh,
heard? This is sort of off topic a little bit. I saw an interview with Dusty Slay, who I really enjoy his humor, and he talked about, I think it was his podcast, his own podcast with his wife, and he talked about pre and post Netflix special level of confidence on stage, and he talks about I think if I'm remembering this correctly, post Netflix special, he now goes on stage almost subconsciously, like, I don't have to prove that I'm funny. You know
oh
how
wow.
I get on stage, I don't know about you, but we're constantly feeling like we have to prove I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
comedian. I'm supposed to be up here,
Yeah, sure.
and you have that insecurity. And it really is true. You're in, Macon, Georgia at a bar, and they're like, it's comedy night. Shut the TV off. And you're proving, but he's like, post Netflix, especially had this different confidence level because it was almost like a stamp of approval,
Right.
And I
Yeah,
want,
and it's not just confidence. He's now drawing people who like him.
yeah,
That's a game changer. That's what I got to see with Caroline. You know, it doesn't have to be 100% of the crowd, but if 40% of the crowd comes in because they love you, it completely changes the dynamic. The valleys are higher, the peaks are higher. You could do edgy and weird and awkward and eat it for a minute. They're going to stay with you. It
yeah.
totally changes the situation. And I've had a taste of that with, the Bob and Tom show, my own little small potato way. To have a little bit of that, it changes everything. It's really great.
Do you have a insecurity in the back of your mind that if you're doing all these, let's say you're doing a string of shows for folks that know who you are and they're specifically coming for you, that you're able to get away with a little bit more, jokes are a little funnier, newer stuff's funnier than it is for now, and then if you did it as if you did it for strangers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what was extra challenging to me about being on the ships. They're not my people; they're just
Uh,
people. So I would occasionally get somebody come grab me, like, dude, I grew up in Ohio, but listen to you. I can't believe you're on the boat,
that's
But
great.
that's not what the crowd was. The crowd was 99%
Yeah,
people who just wandered in. So yeah, in a way, I got a little spoiled, maybe, but it's in the good way. It
sure.
supports your creativity. It allows you to have
Yes.
more space to fail and to do something a little dark or a
To
little
expand on
weird.
too.
Yeah, and to have the breadth to go, okay, I'm not panicked to get to the next thing. It's it's really a gift to have it in whatever capacity, to whatever extent, for however long. It's
Yeah.
always good, I
I
think.
feel I feel that there's one specific club I do in Hilton Head, Comedy Magic Cabaret. They strictly book clean comedians. Most of the time, the owner does his show. It's his residency. Um, but when I'm headlining that room, I think because the audience, it's a tight room that sells out typically, and it's $50 tickets plus, really fancy joint, and they want to
Oh, I
see.
know this place, the Weird Magic place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I like that place.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I just feel so free, and it's because the audience is we're there to laugh, and they paid so much. they're vested, and I feel such a freedom. I've probably expanded on more bits there than I have any other club.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like that place,
Yeah.
and I like that dude. That place existing is a cool story.
And by the way, I worked with Caroline years ago, featured for her at this club that's now closed in Jacksonville, not because of her. Um, and I remember making her laugh quite a bit off stage, and she goes, "If I ever make it again, I'm taking you with me." So remind her who I am.
I wish she would take me with her.
Yeah, take us both. We can rekindle our comedy cellar days. Last question, but um, it's Kostaki.com, right? That's your website.
Yeah, yeah. And the Facebook pages for All Pro Lines and Costaki, those are the two go-to social media platforms. But I'm on all of them. Come find me.
Yeah. Sorry, not it's not Bob Smith. It's not hard to find Kostaki, Economopoulos.
You can
You
find
know,
me.
keychain. The if you weren't a comedian, what do you think you would be? In all honesty, if you didn't take this path, where did young Greek boy Kostaki?
Well, the path I was on, which I bailed from to tell jokes, was to get a PhD and teach at the college level, teach American
Mm,
government. That's what I was studying to do. Both of my parents have PhDs, and both of them taught the college level at one point or another. My dad in particular, like 30 plus years on the University of Georgia system. So I was going to do that. I mean, I like academia. I like being around smart people and it not being a corporate environment. And it's about learning and thinking. And I like summers off. And
yeah.
I probably would have done that. Maybe.
I
I
got in
don't know.
trouble with the group of teachers at a small show where I didn't know there was a table of 12 or 15 dead center, and there was maybe 40 in the club. They were carrying the show for sure. And then I find out they're teachers, and I go, oh, that's great. And I said, hey, tell me this thing. What's this deal with teacher planning days? Like my son will have a random Tuesday off. And I said, teacher planning day. I go, isn't that summer? And they hate it. They shut
Oh,
down real quick. And that was a really rough show for the next 20 minutes or so.
who pisses off teachers? What are you doing?
I don't know. All right. Hey, you want to help me with a joke? I swear I won't keep you more than 3 minutes.
All right. I like
Um,
jokes.
the PhD is what triggered it. So this is a real incident, and I kind of talk about the stage. I have talked about on stage a couple of times. So I'm walking my dog in my neighborhood, and a neighbor I never met comes running out of her house, screaming and yelling. Oh my gosh, she's carrying like a 2-year-old girl. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And she goes, are you a doctor? Are you a doctor? Are you a doctor? And I'm kind of startled. And it kind of made me think about my life choices. And I was like, no, I'm not a doctor. She goes, what should I do? What should I do? And she points to her daughter's head. It has a huge welt, like an inch, just this giant blue welt. Should I take my daughter to the doctor? I'm like, yes, I would. That would be my first step. So then I go back in the house and I kind of put the dog up and I would go back outside just to see if she needs help. I don't know if she has a bunch of kids and she's not there. Week goes by. I see her walking towards me, flagging me down in the neighborhood. And she goes, hey, I just wanted to apologize for my frantic behavior before. I said, no, I mean, your daughter's, she goes, obviously you're not a doctor. I was like, oh, okay. Why can't I said that? Why can't I be a doctor? She's like, well, no. We all know in the neighborhood that you're the comedian. I'm like, oh, maybe you see my drama special. And I kind of went home thinking about my life's choices. And then I thought to myself, what if I was a doctor? I did have a doctorate, like a thank God I wasn't a doctor of history or
Oh,
something. Like
right. Yeah, yeah. Doctor of sociology.
if she came out and she was like, are you a doctor? I'm like, yes. And she goes, should I take my daughter to the doctor? I'm like, I don't know, but if the Germans hadn't sunk the Lusitania, World War I would have never have.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like
So
that.
that's the whole story in a nutshell. There's really no punches, kind of just funny moments, and then the ending is sort of the punch. But just the whole idea of having a doctorate, and especially those that are adamant, like call me doctor.
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah, that's a funny idea. Where I thought you were going to go, which maybe you can explore this, is what you can offer as a comedian. Well, I can,
Right.
you know, I can sit down and write some jokes about this. This might
Right.
be in my act someday, you know.
Right. Don't you
Uh,
dare.
I'll let you know how it works.
Right. I don't think tickling will help in this situation, but
But it's probably gonna, these jokes are all gonna work better if the kid is okay. So do take her to a doctor.
right. Where are you going? Why are you holding me? Yeah. But maybe I'll just explore kind of what are the most common doctorates and where the funny could be in those, you know.
Oh, right. Yeah. 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 History is a good, that's a good, I think that's a good first effort. I would explore that.
Right, because there's so many there's moments in history, you know, and if Abe Lincoln hadn't gone to the theater that night, then they wouldn't, you know, whatever.
Yeah. It's easy to find a thing. Yeah. The Lusitania.
I think that's the ship that the Germans. I think it is. I don't know if it's the actual ship. The Germans kept sinking ships with their subs, and the U.S. that finally brought the U.S. into the war.
Is that right?
Yeah,
All right.
I don't know.
Oh.
Nobody cares. Nobody.
I feel like I used to know that. I don't think I know that anymore.
Well, I think I was helping my son with his history homework, and I kind of, rekindled my.
It's good.
All right, brother. Well, hey man, hang out here for a second. And appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we get to talk sooner than 2 years from now.
Yeah. Let's do it. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, brother.